All right, here's the demo for the first watercolor exercises. You should have this Koh-i-Noor watercolor wheel with 24 colors as part of your set. To do the watercoloring, you want to be set up with a container for your water. The bigger it is, the less often you have to change it. You're going to want some paper towels. Pull out a sheet of paper from your pad of paper and use that as your scrap. Watercolor set here has a top that you can use as a mixing tray, and it's got 4 different trays in it. The first one going to have your primary colors, black, burnt sienna, and white. You don't need to do the white. 2 is going to have your oranges and red. 3 is going to have your greens, and then 4 is going to have your blues. But one thing I noticed about this set, this new batch we just got here, the spring of 24, is that the colors aren't exactly the same. From this printout from their website, which will be included in our assignment, here they got burnt umber right there, and that's not burnt umber, but on this older version of the set that I used to paint this, I do have the burnt umber, but that's like some sort of purpley color there. But the first thing to do for the assignment is to print out the PDF and fill in all the blanks best you can. Again, that's going to be a little different. And this is far from watercolor paper. This is just regular copy paper, so there's only so good you can get it, but it's going to be a good chart for you to know what color things are going to dry to, because watercolors change color as they dry. I would suggest before you do that, just quickly run it under the faucet so everything gets a little bit wet. You're also going to need brushes, so you should have a pack of brushes. Always remember to rinse out new brushes before you use them. Got your pad of paper. You're going to want something to mix up some paint in. If you don't have a palette like this, you can always use little dishes or yogurt containers and lids and things like that. Let's start off with getting some of the paint out. So use all the paints to fill out that color sheet, but then I think for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to keep it to this first tray here that is the primary colors. So I've already got a few colors mixed up for a little bit later, but right now let's just see what we can do for colors. So yellow is kind of a special color. Putting some water on there, activating, scrubbing it a little bit. So I usually, if I'm going to be using yellow, I usually do that first because it's so easy to contaminate. It's got a very narrow value range, by which I mean, if you think of dark yellow, it's not that dark, right? Because if it gets really dark, it's going to either go green or it's going to go orange on you, as opposed to something like blue, which you can have a super light blue or a super dark blue, so it's got a really large range. But anyway, so it's very easy to contaminate your yellows, so you just gotta be extra careful with those, and try to use clean water and stuff. And I can just test it here, so have a piece of test paper so you can test the consistency. So this is not a watercolor class, it's an illustration class, so we're not using fancy watercolors or paper. Think of it more like staining the paper. So if it's sitting too much on top of the paper, then it's too thick. But if it doesn't really have much color, then it's too thin. That's why I want the test paper to just make sure that things are doing what you think they should do. So again, to make up a puddle of paint, I'll just scrub it a little bit to activate it, then I'll tip it over and sort of wipe my brush off onto the side, get some fresh water, put it back on the pan, scrub it. And I've used this one a little bit. So it's got a little indentation, so it makes it a little bit easier to do. Your brand new ones are going to be totally flat, but they'll break in eventually. But you just want to keep it kind of tidy as best you can, so that's where paper towels come in. As it can kind of clean things up. If your yellow gets really dirty or whatnot, you can always just kind of dab it like that. All right. I generally like to do, oops, look at that. I just put some red in my yellow right away. Talk about contaminating. All right. I try to do as much as I can with a flat brush because I like the way that I can cover a large area, but I can also get kind of straight lines. I can also do this just fine with pointier brush as well, or a round. So, but where rounds are really good for is you can kind of draw with them, and of course you can fill in small areas. So let's move over to pad paper here. And again, this is mixed media paper and not watercolor paper. It doesn't take as much water as well as real watercolor paper does. But let's do some more basic exercises. So I'm just going to take a pencil and I'm going to draw out the shapes I'm going to work with. So let me draw out a couple of rectangles, 3 rectangles here for the washes. And just take this lid here and I'll do a circle for our color wheel that we're going to do. And I'll draw a little circle here, some sort of organic shape like a leaf type thing maybe, and something that's kind of maybe like a twig or a branch or just some sort of organic shape here, regular shape. And let's get going. So the first thing I want to do is a flat wash. So to do that, you want to have enough paint to finish your wash. You don't want to have to mix up more paint before you do it. So I'll take this orange that I got, and for the flat wash, I'm just going to start at one end, and I didn't get that fully mixed up, did I? And I'm going to just bring it down, keeping the leading edge wet. Try not to overwork it. I'm just going to even that out a little bit, but I don't want to overwork it because the paper generally can't handle it. Plus I'm liable to get little goopers in there. That's trying to be a flat wash, but maybe I'll jump the gun a little bit and show you how to do a little wet and wet. So while it's still wet, I can drop some paint in there. Again, this is easier to do with watercolor paper, but you can still sort of see how it works. It kind of blooms there. And then the other thing is you take your paper towel, dry out your brush, and then you can start to pick things up. So I can wipe my brush and lift out areas. So wet and wet, you drop paint into the paint while it's still wet and it blooms like that. Lifting out, you take your dry brush and you start pulling out the wet paint. Let's do take 2 on the flat wash. We'll do it with red this time. So there we go. I'm gonna just keep my edge wet, that leading edge. Don't let it get a chance to dry out. And hopefully that will even out as it dries. The goal is to try to make it as flat as possible. And then the next one is going to be a gradiated wash. So for this one, I'm going to make it really dark up here at the top. Maybe even grab some fresh from the bowl, make sure it's nice and dark here. But again, keeping that leading edge wet. And then I'll clean my brush and I'll start pulling the paint down. So part of the loveliness of watercolor is how spontaneous it is and all that. So and I can go back in a little bit if I want. Drop my brush, pull it down. It's still a little streaky. All right, that's gonna have to be good enough. See if I can get it to run down a little bit. All right. Next, fill up some of these little shapes here. Get a fresh piece of paper towel. Let's make it more orange if we're going orange. All right, filling in irregular shapes. So same idea that you want to keep the leading edge wet. You want to have enough paint to fill up your shape. You don't want to have to stop and mix up paint in the middle of it. So make sure you got a big enough puddle of paint in your pan. And I'm just working that wet edge. And then I can go in and dry out my brush if I want. And I can kind of like do like a little lift out technique on the top edge as if there was maybe a little bit of highlight on one side. That sort of idea. Here and then on this one, fill that in, that tip there, try to keep it inside the line a little bit, bring it down, and I'll do the shadow side of this leaf after this dries out a little bit. I'll just go ahead and paint it all right here. And again, I'm gonna just go ahead and dry my brush. I'm just gonna try to envision where that center line of my leaf would be. Go somewhere like this, and it might continue down there or something. Anyway, I don't want to overwork it though, as I am wont to do. All right, so there's that one. Then let's try to make this like sort of like a little bit of a ball or something, blue or something. There's my test paper. Your test paper. So I'm just going to go ahead and flood this whole shape here. All right. So again, I'll dry out my brush and I'll try to pick up a little right here as if there's a little highlight, and then I can go in with my blue and I can do that sort of wet on wet and drop it in. Let's see if I can kind of do a little bit of a shadow edge there. So now let's go and do our color wheel. Here's my pencil. So I've got this circle here that I'm going to do my color wheel. So let me first divide it up. So I'm just going to estimate the center of it. Something like that. And I can sort of pinch measure to see if I'm close enough. And then I'll try to take this radius and divide it more or less in half like this. Do a parallel line to this one. Yeah, something like that. And then I'll just lay out my color wheel. So I'll make a triangle from here to there. Let's see what's it going to be. It'll be something like this to get our hexagon. So we'll have our secondary colors on these, and we'll have our primary colors on these, and I'll just leave that center blank. Before I do the watercolor, I want to do any erasing I'm going to do, because once you have watercolor on it, it's not very easy to erase it. All right, so there's the layout for our color wheel. All right, got my clean water. Now I'll start doing my color wheel. So, like I said before, I'm gonna start with yellow. You can see it's already a little dirty, so I'll clean up my yellow a little bit first by wetting it and then cleaning it up with my paper towel. Clean enough. A nice puddle of yellow here, and then I will carefully fill out my yellow triangle, and then I will try to keep that clean. Next I'll do my red. It's not a bad idea if you have the time to wait for that to dry, but I'm going to chance it, and I'm just going to be careful not to let my red run into my yellow. Again, just be very careful. Blue's a little bit of a bully color. It can really contaminate things, so just be extra careful near that yellow. Keep the leading edge wet and fill it up. So there's our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. So if you think about commercial printing, they use what's called CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, to do all the printing of all the colors you see in like magazines and stuff. And so a lot of people use magenta and cyan because it mixes more easily into a lot of different colors. So generally when you're doing your primary colors, it's my suggestion to pick one that's kind of magenta and a blue that's kind of cyan. All right, so now I've already mixed up my secondary colors. Mix them together, have your scrap paper, and test it out. Make sure you like the purple, green, and orange. So I made those by mixing up my primary colors. So I can go through here now and say yellow and blue is green. So I will put the green here. I'm gonna keep it away from that wet blue and yellow. Otherwise, it'll just go right into them and mess them up. So I'll just try. I could always go back in later if I want to and fill it in, but I probably won't. All right, so yellow and red is going to be orange. Like right here, it's kind of puddling up a little bit. I can suck a little bit of that out. Dry my brush. Some of this orange. I can suck a little extra out if I'm worried about it puddling up too much. Something like that. And then there's just one more. It's going to be the purple. So blue and red going to make purple. So there's my basic color wheel. And then, so as far as the mixing goes, you mixed up your secondary colors, or I mixed up my secondary colors, right? I mixed the red and yellow to make orange, and the red and blue to make purple, and the blue and yellow to make green. So now I just want to do one more thing, and that is showing how you can neutralize colors by mixing them with their complements. So adjacent colors on the color wheel are called analogous, and when they're opposite of each other on the wheel, they're called complementary. So if I was to take my red and my green, drop my brush, look at some of this green, I'll put it in here with the red, mix it up. So in theory it should be gray, and lo and behold it's gray. Usually it doesn't work out that perfect, but the idea is that complementary colors, when you mix them together, kind of mute the color, turn it to gray. Sometimes it's more of a muddy brown, but it's still muted. And later on this will become particularly important when we do our botanical drawings, because usually greens and landscapes and stuff don't look quite right. Usually they're a little oversaturated if you just use the colors out of your palette. So usually it's a good idea to mix a little bit of the complementary of green, some sort of red sort of a thing to dull down the greens. But we'll get that to another time. Right now we're going to go with yellow and purple. Yellow I'll start with because that's the delicate color. So I'll get a little puddle of yellow. And then I'll get a little bit of my purple. Oh wait, before I do that, let me do my yellow swatch. So I'm going to take the yellow, and I'm going to take purple, and I'll take some more of that purple, and I'll put it in there with that yellow I just put there. And we'll see how neutral it is. See that yellow got really overwhelmed. Didn't take much purple to take over the show, because you can see that still looks like a purple, kind of a muted one. Just for fun, maybe what I'll do is take a little bit more yellow, wipe it off on the side so I don't bring too much of that purple gray back over to my palette, and I'll mix it up and see what I end up with. Now it looks brown. Anyway, the point is that it's desaturated. It's not as bright of a color because I mixed the complement with it. All right, one more time. So that just leaves blue and orange. So blue and this is the orange I was using. Orange. And then I will take some of this orange and I will wipe it on the side to mix it with the blue. I guess I'll have to do. Alright, so and then there it is. So this goes to that, this goes to that goes to that, like that. So the watercolor exercise, to cap it all off, is to do a swatch so you have all the different colors at your reference. Try some of the different washes. Try doing the gradated wash where it gradates from one color to light. Try to do one where you try to keep it even. You can see mine's not perfect. That's part of the charm of watercolors. It won't be perfect, but you still try. And then this one where I did a little bit of wet and wet, where I dropped in some paint into the wash that was wet, and then I also dried my brush out and I sucked some up or lifted some of the paint out. Then I did these organic forms here, though I never did get around to doing the shadow side of this leaf. So here, I'll do that right now. Some organic shapes. I tried to do like a little sphere here where I washed it, and then I did some wet and wet to try to make a shadow side and lifted out the light. Then I made my color wheel here with my primaries and my secondary colors, and then I took my primary colors and their complements and mixed them together to try to see what they look like when they're neutralized. All right, good luck.